Pete Golding has a secret for how he's going to keep Ole Miss up on top, and it's pretty genius. This is the Locked On Ole Miss podcast.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Ole Miss podcast, the most watched Ole Miss podcast out there. I'm your host, Stephen Willis, a 10-year veteran member of the national media with Yahoo Sports and a former Ole Miss staff member. We're proud to be a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the number one sports podcast network in America, and that is all because of you. On today's show, we're breaking down the two big-time tight ends Ole Miss added through the transfer portal and the roles they are likely to play and what is already a stacked room. Then we'll turn our attention to the returning tight ends, players the Rebels are extremely high on heading into the season. But first, we're going to discuss Pete Golding's latest staff additions. The hiring of Mike Stoops and Todd Cooley brings even more head coaching experience and leadership into an already talented coaching staff. But one thing is clear, Pete Golding isn't afraid to surround himself with coaches who have done the job before and can help him out. All of this and more on today's Locked On Ole Miss podcast. Remember, we're free and available on all of the podcast apps and on YouTube, and a special hello to the insiders and everydayers who make this show what it is, your team every day. This episode is brought to you by Mazda. We put the same drive into every detail. Wins define the moment, but putting in the work, well, that defines you. Stay tuned for highlights in this week's Moving the Game Forward. There's more to a Mazda because there's more to you. So this offseason, we've already done a show about how perfect this offseason has been for Pete Golding. And part of that perfection has been staff construction for Pete Golding. He already was able to retain every defensive coach on the staff. You know, you were wondering about Wes Neighbors and B. Brown and all of those guys. He retained them all, with the exception of Chris Kiffin and, honestly, duh. Then he got over to the offensive side of the ball and was able to keep Joe Judge, who was instrumental in the offense last season. He was able to keep John Garrison, which did an unbelievable job with the offensive line last season. When you looked at it, it was about 60% of the coaching staff from the year before has been retained by Pete Golding. And he did a very good job by hiring John David Baker. He was the co-offensive coordinator for Ole Miss in 2022 and 2023. No doubt. LaDamian Washington, big-time wide receivers coach. Everybody knows what type of wide receivers coach he is, and getting the number one recruiter in America, and Frank Wilson, to come coach the running backs, who actually coincidentally came from LSU. That's a big deal. And you looked at it and it was like, well, Joe Judge was a former coach of the New York Giants, and he obviously was somebody that was at least being passed ideas by, you know. Frank Wilson used to be a head coach of UTSA, and it's like Ole Miss has some head coaches that they can turn to. Well, the analyst staff started to come out, and we talked about this coach as a possibility way back when Ole Miss was getting ready for Tulane, and the practices that were happening in Oxford leading up to that game, and that is Mike Stoops. We tried to figure out the correlation of what was going on with Mike Stoops and Pete Golding. Turns out they coached at Alabama together and when Mike Stoops was in the football coaches rehabilitation program by Nick Saban. And that is where he met Pete Golding. Well, Pete Golding hired Mike Stoops to come in and be an analyst. Now, everybody knows analysts can coach on the field just as well as they can do off the field. They just don't recruit. So Mike Stoops can put all of his football IQ and acumen into the defensive room without having to go out and do all the recruiting stuff as well. Now, one thing that's interesting, I think his name is Brad White, the defensive coordinator for Kentucky. He's down at Florida right now. He gave lots of offenses in this conference trouble. He was very good at what he did. And He is one of the few defenses in the country that legitimately gave Lane Kiffin offenses trouble. No matter who the quarterback was, Jackson Dart or Austin Simmons or anybody back there, that defense gave a Lane Kiffin offense trouble. Mike Stoops brings that to the linebacker room, a room that is going to be really, really talented. It's going to be a more talented unit than it was a year ago. It may not quite be as talented as 2024, but there are going to be similarities between this defense and the 2024 defense. Another thing on that 2024 staff is they brought in Zach Arnett to coach the linebackers in a similar situation. Somebody that had been a head coach before, somebody that was a really good defensive mind, somebody that has a structure and a scheme that can give another offense trouble. They did that with Zach Arnett, and you saw how good the linebackers were in 2024. Well, they brought in Mike Stoops, similar pedigree, similar understanding, kind of gets his hand on these linebackers with the linebacker coaches that are already on staff, and this defense has a chance to be really good. And he's just another person needed to bounce ideas off of, whether it's practice schedule or whatever's going on. The decisions that a head coach has to make, Mike Stoops can help do that. Mike Stoops is a very, very well respected defensive mind in the business. He goes all the way back to coaching the defense and linebackers at Oklahoma under his brother Bob Stoops. He had his head coaching stint with the Arizona Wildcats, and for the last little bit, he's been coaching linebackers with his other brother, Mark Stoops. And they might have trouble with offense, which they probably would because all the Stoops brothers, I think, went to Iowa. So it kind of tracks if you think about it. But it's an opportunity to bring different ideas, different schemes that can help out a Pete Golding defense for what they do. It should be pretty interesting, and when they construct what's going on, how much input he has is going to be pretty big. Now, another coach that got brought in that is not being brought in as an analyst, but he is going to be an assistant to the head coach. I guess that's an analyst with the title. They play the title games with different coaches. You have the head coach of the defense, and the defensive coordinator. When the head coach is the defensive coordinator, it's all for money. It doesn't necessarily matter with what's going on. But Todd Cooley took a job at Ole Miss, and he came over from Delta State. He's the all-time winningest coach at Delta State. We all know that Pete Golding went to Delta State. I think he was an All-American at Delta State. He started coaching at Delta State. So there's an affinity with the statesman when it comes to Pete Golding, but also when you have Todd Cooley, he's another head coach, albeit at a different level where you can bounce ideas off of this worked, that worked, all of that stuff. And it's just another avenue for him to be better. This is how Pete Golding is going to keep the Ferrari on the tracks at Ole Miss. He's going to do it by not being intimidated by people who have done his job before. There are coaches all the time that is my way or the highway, and we are not going to listen to what you went through with your job. I know it all. I know everything. Pete Golding isn't like that. He is willing to take every idea that he can get, every experience that you have had, to make him equivalently a more experienced head coach. And this is a guy that already has 3 playoff games under his belt, 2 playoff wins as a head coach in 3 games. We all know that the season starts early and everything's going on. But the big game coaching, he is going to be good at that because he has so many minds in the room and he has an excellent acumen. Because remember, he spent 5 years with the GOAT too. He got to see every day how Nick Saban ran a football team. He got to see every day what it takes to make Alabama, Alabama. He was a part of the last national championship that Alabama had. This strategy of not being intimidated of knowledge, whenever that just doesn't bother you, is going to help you be successful in whatever you do. That's the advice that I can give you no matter what you do. Don't be afraid of somebody that has done it before and knows stuff. He can teach you. There's things that you can learn that you don't know what you don't know. He has experienced all different things, and having a different perspective in the room. This channel is a perspective-based channel. It is all about different people that think different things about Ole Miss sports and the periphery. Do not fear perspectives. Pete Golding doesn't fear perspectives. And that's the reason that Ole Miss football is going to continue to be really good. All right. So a setback defined Lukasz's first year in Oxford, but the tight end room now may be his to own. We'll explain what we made right after this. This is a Locked On Ole Miss podcast. You know, workplace chaos, deadlines stacking up, inbox overflowing, and one position you have to fill still sitting open when the pressure's on and you need to make the right hire. This is a job for sponsored jobs. Indeed, sponsored jobs helps you reach the people who actually fit what you're looking for, either skills or experience or, yes, location. So you're not just hoping for the right candidate, hoping they stumble across that post. And here's a stat that kind of says it all. In the minute I've been talking to you, companies like yours have made 27 hires on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. So if you're hiring, spend less time searching and more time interviewing candidates who check all of your boxes with Indeed sponsored jobs. Spend less time searching and more time actually interviewing candidates who check all of your boxes. Less stress, less time, more results. When you need the right person to cut through all of the chaos, this is a job for Indeed sponsored jobs. And listeners to this show will get $75 sponsored job credit to help your job get the premium status it deserves at Indeed.com/podcast. Just go to Indeed.com/podcast right now and support our show by saying you heard about it here on this podcast, the Locked On Ole Miss podcast. Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? This is a job for Indeed sponsored jobs. Hey, do us a favor, like, subscribe, and comment on the video. Subscribe to the podcast on whichever audio podcast you're listening to and give it a 5-star review. It costs absolutely nothing, but it does keep all of this free. And thank you for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen of the day. And thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network in America. That's all because of you. If you haven't already, go check out the Everydayer Club. It has access to an ad-free audio feed for Locked On Ole Miss, compatible with Apple Podcasts, Spotify, basically every major podcast app. It has an invite to the members-only Locked On Everydayers Club Discord server. And if you join that server, I will send you an invite to my personal private Locked On Ole Miss server on Discord as well. So we'll see. It also includes a group chat for listeners of the show. Hosts like me hang out all the time talking about what's going on in Discount Door and all that. We love talking Ole Miss sports. We do it more than just here as well. So special all access episodes of Locked On Ole Miss, Dalen Flowers, Corey Burton, and Mike Huseman are on the feed as well. That's the only place you can find them at this point. So go to lockedonolemisssupercast.com or tap the link in the show notes down below to learn more. All right. So one thing that's interesting, and I kind of intentionally waited until almost last. We haven't gone over the interior offensive line yet, but the tight end room for Ole Miss lost Daquan Wright and Trace Bruckler to graduation. Daquan Wright, really good player. He came on the podcast. He was a really good dude. We actually did a podcast with him on his NIL thing. They posted it on my site. It was absolutely awesome to see, and they did a pretty fantastic job with it. Lukasz got injured early on in fall camp. He was actually doing pretty well. They were very impressed with him, but it kind of set him behind, and whenever he was behind, he kind of got passed by Daquan Wright and eventually Caleb Odom, who's coming back as well. But those two position players with Trace Bruckler being the blocker kind of took Lukasz out of the equation. Lukasz came on slowly as the year went on in the playoffs against Georgia, caught a touchdown pass, was a very good option as a receiver down the field. I think Lukasz can be a very, very good football player, and this is likely his room moving forward. This season is the Lukasz room. The problem with Lukasz is the same problem that he's had every year of playing college football. He's had trouble staying healthy. So if he can put it together to where he stays healthy, he has all of the skills necessary to be a top shelf tight end in this offense. He can do exactly what Daquan Wright did a year ago and be a really good receiver for Trinidad Chambliss at Ole Miss. The other tight end that is coming back is Caleb Odom. And I do say tight end because I do not think he is moving to wide receiver. He is 6'5". He has a chance to be an Evan Ingram type tight end to where they spread him out to where it looks like 10 personnel, but you can use his size for matchup purposes against whatever's going. You try to match him up on a cornerback or something like that and use the advantage with the body type that Caleb Odom possesses. The problem that Odom had a year ago was occasionally his hands were inconsistent. He needs to spend the next 7 months on the jugs machine every day to where he catches 100, 1,000 passes, whatever the baseline is, to where it just becomes second nature for what he's doing, because he has a chance to be a really, really good and effective player in this Ole Miss offense if he just kind of sands down those rough edges that he has. And then you have Hayden Bradley, who was a freshman that came in a year ago. They are extremely high on him. I think for the Trace Bruckler role, that's going to be a fight for Hayden Bradley. He might be a guy that gets on the field a little bit next season, and you're like, well, I didn't see that coming. But when it looks at it, he is a talented guy out of, I think, Georgia. So the returning tight ends for Ole Miss is Lukasz, who caught a touchdown against the Georgia Bulldogs. Everybody decided to, I guess, poke fun at the male pattern baldness that was going on with Lukasz. That was that guy. Caleb Odom, big-time player, 5-star coming out of high school. When you look at this Ole Miss team, they could literally set up an all 5-star wide receiving core at Ole Miss next year if they wanted to. Now, I don't think they want to at this point, because the way it's set up is Jonte Cook, in my opinion, is going to play in the slot, but Caleb Cunningham, he might get on the field, but then you need like Jace Matthews and Caleb Odom, and you can be all 5 stars at the wide receiver position for Ole Miss. Now, the purpose of this is Trinidad's just got a massive amount of weapons and toys that he can play with, especially in the pass game. Everybody wants to point at the Ole Miss pass catchers that were lost. Daquan Wright, Trey Wallace, Deshaun Stribling. Everybody needs to know about these players. They were not highly rated transfers when they came in. Now, they were really talented transfers. Deshaun Stribling almost having 1,000 yards with that quarterback challenged offense was pretty big. Trey Harris in that quarterback challenged offense, putting up the numbers he did, pretty big. And nobody knew who Deuce Alexander was. Ole Miss did. The player personnel department at Ole Miss did. And this player personnel department, which was essentially built by Pete Golding in the image of the Nick Saban departments when he was there, found these players. And they figured out a way they could get bargain. And you don't spend $1.5 million on Eric Singleton. You spend $700,000 on Deshaun Stribling. And the way they figured out how to do that was get receivers off of teams that had trouble throwing the football. You want to look at this year? Ole Miss has 3 receivers, counting a tight end, that they got with Syracuse ties. One, although Michael Smith, we'll talk about him next. He was at South Carolina under Lenore Sellers. Again, quarterback issues. But at Syracuse, there was a lacrosse player playing quarterback. Ole Miss picked up a couple of wide receivers from there. They picked up a wide receiver that was at Auburn a year ago. Obviously, they had problems throwing the football with Jackson Arnold. So they have figured out a system of how they can save, I don't know, 40, 30% of price on equally as talented players. And tight end wise, we're going to go into that just a little bit more because Ole Miss may have found their Daquan Wright for 2026. They may have found their tight end of the future in this transfer portal this time. And that is definitely something to monitor. All right. Two portal tight ends, two major opportunities, and we examine how they fit into the Ole Miss offense. Well, that's coming up next. Stick around. This is Mazda's moving the game forward. For those of you who show there's more to the score than what's on the screen, Dom Decker hit a home run in the sweep of Missouri State this weekend. And the way he plays the game is winning baseball. And who doesn't want winning baseball? Ole Miss is currently 8-0, and they just find a way to win. If the pitching isn't there, they hit the ball a ton. If they don't have they have trouble hitting the ball, they pitch the ball a ton. They just win baseball games, and that's what you want from a baseball team. These remind us of what it really takes to raise the bars, the hard work off the quarter field, dialing in every detail, giving that extra fire, that grit, and I never quit. We put the same passion into every model, highlights that make the meal real. What it took to get there makes it count. There's more to a Mazda because there's more to you. So stop by your local Mazda dealer and test drive one today. Ever wanted to experience the NBA Finals live and in person? FanDuel is giving you the chance to turn that dream into a reality with their NBA sweepstakes. Here's how it works. Use your profit boost on any NBA future, and you will automatically be entered for a shot to win an NBA Finals trip for two. That's right. Flights, tickets, the whole experience. If you're already looking at the board and thinking about which team can make a deep run, this might be the perfect time to lock it in. I love futures this time of year, whether picking a team to win the championship or even grab a conference title. It adds that extra layer of excitement to every game down the stretch. And now, not only can you pick cash, but you can also send yourself to the NBA Finals. So visit FanDuel.com to get started. Use your profit boost on an NBA future and get entered for a chance to win a trip to the NBA Finals. Play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. So one thing's interesting. I think it's Michael Smith. Now, I could be having some brain things, so if I get a pronunciation wrong or something like that, I apologize. The tight end that transferred from South Carolina after a short pit stop at Syracuse, but he essentially played with South Carolina. I think that was Michael Smith. Then you have Prieskorn, who transferred in as well. One thing that is interesting about Ole Miss, signing two tight ends, that's almost a statement of intent. That is a like-for-like replacement for Trace Bruckler and Daquan Wright. And one thing that is interesting about this is they are honestly similar type tight ends at this point. It is almost a one-for-one, an apples-for-apples switch. Whenever you have Daquan Wright and you trade him for Michael Smith, the athleticism there, the big body's there. He was a four-star player, a highly rated four-star player in high school, and he just couldn't quite make it work. He went to South Carolina, and under their first coach and everything, it was there, but it was tight end arrow screen essentially to start out with, but that is all they used the tight end for in that offense. And they did it under Mike Smith or Mike Shula, but much less effective. Now, I do think he may have left a little bit early because Kendall Briles uses the tight end, and the tight end's going to find a workload, especially if it's a big guy like Michael Smith is, being 250 pounds. He's going to find a way to get used. They're not just going to duck and chuck it down the field. And he may have left a little bit early, but I'm glad he did because he can do all of the stuff that Daquan Wright did for Ole Miss. Remember, against Miami, it was Daquan Wright that started to unlock the Hurricanes at the end to the point where Ole Miss just ran out of time in that game. Miami scored a touchdown. Ole Miss would have scored a touchdown potentially with one more play. So that's interesting. Now, Prieskorn, right now he fits what Hayden Bradley does, what Trace Bruckler does. He's kind of the blocking tight end in the moment, but as his game gets developed and more well-rounded, he has a chance to be a Lukasz type tight end. He has a chance to be a guy that is a very good receiving threat and a very balanced tight end in the Ole Miss offense. Brady Prieskorn is a former 4-star player. He ended up going to Michigan. Remember, the Prieskorns are from Michigan. So anytime you get an offer from the Maize and Blue, it probably carries a little bit extra significance. He got that offer, went up there. Michigan was a bit of a dumpster fire this year, and he got out and went down where Hayden Prieskorn was honestly loved when he was at Ole Miss. And with John David Baker coming back, he obviously coached Hayden Prieskorn. There's a relationship there. John David Baker helped him come back as well, Brady Prieskorn. All right, so the baseball team obviously swept Missouri State. My boy Don Decker hit a home run in this game. I think that might be his first home run, but it was nice to see that happen. Women's basketball got blown out against South Carolina. You saw the moment in the fourth quarter where they ran out of gas. This team has no legs. They need to figure out a way to rest them as much as they can before the SEC tournament, or it will get bad. It will be really similar to when Ole Miss had that 7 overtime game with the Arkansas Razorback, and they were just worn out after that. So that is something to monitor. But right now, this women's basketball team does not have any legs. And the men's team got boat raced by the Florida Gators, but that was expected as well. They haven't won a basketball game in about a month. So we'll continue to talk about it, I guess, but it kind of is what it is. Anyway, thanks for tuning in today to the Locked On Ole Miss podcast. We're going to continue to talk transfer portal all week long, so make sure you subscribe and follow the show so you can get all the latest episode. We're on all the social channels to check out as well. If you never miss an episode, the Everydayer Club is built for you. Get Locked On Ole Miss ad-free, plus members-only Discord access and more. Head to lockedonolemiss.supercast.com to join the club. For those of you on video, we're going to send you on over to the first ever 24/7 National Locked On Network YouTube channel and audio. Make sure you check out a second listen, either Locked On SEC or Locked On College Football. Hotty toddy, everybody. Ole Miss 8-0 in baseball and spring football. We're going to find out something about that fairly quickly, I would imagine. Anyway, take care. We'll talk to you later. Hotty toddy.